Hello and welcome. My name is Matt Cameron and I'm the Global Managing Director of LGBT Great. And I'm joined today by the brilliant Robyn, the Group Chief Operating Officer and General Counsel at Man Group. So today we're here to mark the significance of Holocaust Memorial Day and talk a little bit about the Be the Light in the Darkness campaign led by the Holocaust Memorial Day Trust. Now, the Holocaust will forever be a stain on our world history and was a truly horrific time. Holocaust victims were people who were targeted specifically for discriminatory reasons including ethnicity, religion, political beliefs and sexual orientation. It's estimated that approximately 17 million people tragically lost their lives. So the Be the Light campaign encourages everybody to really reflect on the depths and darkness that humanity can sometimes sink to. But it also enables us to recognise how identities, individuals and communities came together to be the light and overcome the darkness. Edith Carter, survivor of the Holocaust, said, to quote, "Everybody, every human being has an obligation to contribute somehow to this world." Now, Robyn, let's turn to you. Tell us a little bit about why the Holocaust Memorial Day is so important to you.
Listen, I think a Memorial Day provides us all with an opportunity just to stop and reflect. It's a time when we have to think back to a point in our history, Matt, as you said, which for a fault of your being religiously a belief of Judaism, or whether you were gay or whether you were a gypsy, effectively took you into a group of people that could be dehumanized and because of that tortured and actually murdered. The stories that you hear from survivors are truly extraordinary and they touch us all if you spend that time to listen. I remember being at a family get-together when I was very small and noting a tattooed set of numbers, poorly tattooed set of numbers on quite an elderly relative's arm, and being told that they were the lucky ones, the ones who were there and who were still alive.
Wow.
That generation, right? That generation is passing, and we are not going to be able to hear those stories from their own voices for much longer. So we have an obligation to ensure that we never forget, but we never forget how nationalism and prejudice and misinformation and hate speak caused the death of 17 million people.
Yeah, really interesting points actually. We look at a lot of the darkness that we've seen in the last 4 or 5 years with everything that's been going on in the world, particularly in the States and other places, of course. It's actually a pretty scary time, isn't it? Particularly in the States.
For sure. Definitely a time when we actually need to pause.
And really important, I think that everybody comes together. And I think if we think about the way that work has been reimagined and the fact we're not able to connect with people and check in and those simple little things that we just ordinarily pick up on, we're having to work a lot harder at those things. Let's look at sort of the Holocaust as a way to think about altruism and allyship. And tell us a bit about what you think there, Robyn.
Well, I mean, listen, let's be clear. That was a time in history where we saw the coming together of nations, of countries, all unified to defeat the Germans and the Japanese. And they were the allies, right? The allies of World War II. The United Nations, actually. But we should also remember that during that time, very many brave men and women from Europe, including Germany, from all walks of life, from religious beliefs, had the bravery and courage to resist, putting their own lives in peril, right? They worked against Nazi rule. They published newspapers to counter propaganda. They assisted in the escape of minorities, the Jews and the homosexual community. They attempted to sabotage German efforts. They conveyed information to Allied forces. They stood up, they spoke out, and they did so when others didn't. They were heroes, and they deserve our respect, they deserve our thanks, but they also deserve that we continue that strength and we continue that fight against injustice. And we should be alive to those things that you're talking about, Matt, that sort of the sense of nationalism, and somehow the sense of prejudice that sometimes comes along with that. That's what we need to be alive to. And it's that I think the Holocaust taught us, that we need to come together and that you need to work together to defeat injustice.
Yes.
And that's at the country level or at the individual level, they're both equally important and impactful.
Yeah. And it's interesting, isn't it? Because, you look at, again, going back to the dynamics we've seen in the world in the last 5 years, people can be inspired by the light, but shockingly, they can also be inspired by the dark. But the key point, I think, is that the light has to be stronger. And this is where the responsibility, the persistence, being bold and being strong is has got to come in. And which is why I think this campaign is so significant. It's about everybody playing their part, isn't it? No matter how big or how small, about sort of being the light. And you mentioned some really good points there, actually, about responsibility of persistence, courage, resistance. How can we apply some of that thinking into the times that we're in right now, and particularly with all of this uncertainty that we're facing with the pandemic?
I think that it's a time where I want to pull on some of the points you highlighted. It's a time, certainly it's unprecedented. It's a time that I think is challenging for everyone, wherever you sit, actually, and on a very personal level. We are certainly seeing some unprecedented actions, being taken by nations. The summer of last year was a shocker, and social media is both a help and a hindrance, and I could talk for hours on that. But we are literally seeing injustice piped to our iPhones, real time. And what I think is that darkness that you talk about is there and is apparent and is inescapable. But we are also seeing people, despite the pandemic, which is sometimes worrying too, literally coming together to protest injustice. And not just locally, but globally. And in this sort of moment of its own power and its own momentum, we are seeing active support and celebration of healthcare providers. We're seeing in the smallness of our own worlds and our communities, I'm seeing my friends, my colleagues coming together to support each other as people face their own hurdles, and supporting their local communities in a much more engaged way than ever before. I actually think that the pandemic has helped us unite. We have done that thing where we have become more human. Let's not forget that it's dehumanizing behavior. It's the dehumanizing that allows people to torture and allows people to murder. But the pandemic has literally humanized us. We're talking to each other in each other's homes. We're meeting our kids, our dogs, our cats. We are seeing our art. We are looking at our bookcases. We're doing all of those things.
Yes.
And we're not just another person in an office. We're actually connecting with each other in a much more human way.
Yes.
We're hearing each other's stories, right? We are connecting in that spirit of human connection, and yet we are physically apart from one another.
Yeah. I think we're having to work harder at it, aren't we? And I think it has reminded everybody the need for empathy and for understanding. And it's something I think we lost sight of before, when actually, be the light in the darkness, really shine through, doesn't it? We do have to be the light, and everybody has an opportunity really to do that for each other.
Matt, I think you're right. For me, the pandemic isn't the excuse to stop acting. It's actually the catalyst to take action.
Yes.
To be more present, to reach out more than you perhaps did before, to understand and to try and understand, to connect with vulnerability, your own and others, that we recognize that when we come together, we are stronger. The most obvious example is when we share information. Look what our scientists, look what our medical professionals are doing together globally to protect us in coming up with vaccines. That is a global effort. That is us coming together and to protect this very vulnerable thing called humanity. So I think it's the pandemic has shown some of the best of us, but it's a time where we should not forget that there is some darkness there that we need to stand up to.
Yes, I think that the significance around days like Holocaust Memorial Day is that it gives us that rain check, isn't it, and that reality check of what has gone before and the darkness that we can get into and can happen, which means it's a very fragile state, isn't it? So we do have to continually, particularly with a lot of these social dynamics and pressures, Black Lives Matter movements, social exclusion, discrimination. We have always got to keep really focusing on what we can do continually, and with clear acts of allyship to others to really help. And I guess as we come to the end of this this interview today, it'd be good to get your advice. If you could give one piece of advice for being a really good ally to others, what would it be?
Don't think someone else will do it. Be there yourself. Make your contribution. You will make a difference by being an ally. It's the one thing I can guarantee you. So be that person. Be the ally. Stand up. Don't wait for someone else to do it for you.
Yeah, great. Nice and bold as ever, Robyn. Really like it.
Well, you know what? Sometimes the simpler things are actually the things that
just do it.
Make a difference.
Yeah, fantastic. And I know tonight obviously is really significant. At 8 o'clock tonight, across the world, many people are going to be lighting a candle and really reflecting on the significance of Holocaust Memorial Day. I know you mentioned that you'll be doing that as well.
I will, for sure. I actually, it's a very small act and it has tremendous importance. So I really do hope people will be joining me at 8 p.m. at least tonight.
Yeah, I will be. And I really hope this interview as well really encourages everybody watching to really remember those who were lost in the Holocaust, but we also hope that it inspires everybody as well to think about how you can all be the light today. Thank you very much, Robyn. Thank you.
Thanks, Matt.
So today we have 3 polite asks. 1, that you take some time to really reflect on the significance of the Holocaust and what we can learn from it. Secondly, to like and to share the Holocaust Memorial posts to help spread the word and the message to others. And 3, finally, to identify that act of allyship that you can take to be somebody else's light. Thank you.